Sir Taylor, how do parents go about filling in the common application form to get their children into the school they choose?
Okay, the Common Application Form, or CAF, C-A-F, as it's usually abbreviated to, is the form that parents fill in after their children have gone into year 6. In fact, right at the beginning of year 6. So the children who finished year 5 in July and will be going into year 6 in September, those parents will get a Common Application Form through their local education authority within the first couple of weeks of September. Now that'll either be sent home with their child or posted directly to the parents, or the parents will fill it in online, for which they normally have to register. Now, the important thing is what schools they put on the Common Application Form and what order they put those schools in, and both are very important. So parents must consider the following points, which are that, first of all, they should look at how many schools they're allowed to put. Now, for most authorities, that's 6, but there are some authorities where there are only 3 spaces, so they can only choose 3 schools, which is very restrictive compared to having 6. But the majority do have 6, so if you have a choice of 6 schools, then it leaves room for having a couple of fallbacks, which is very important. So the first thing to consider is your true order of preference. The schools should be listed in true order of preference. And if you prefer your local non-grammar school to a grammar school, then you should put that first, and then the rest of the schools in order of preference going down. But if you prefer your child to go to a grammar school compared to a non-grammar school, then put the grammar school higher up and the non-grammar school lower down. Because what will happen is that each school on your list will be informed that you have applied for a place there, and each school will assess your application for a place according to their published admissions criteria, and each school will reply with an acceptance or a refusal for a place at their school. Then the local authority will put a tick or a cross next to each school on your list, and they'll offer a place at the highest one on your list which said yes. So for that reason, they must be in strict order of preference. Even if you think that your child is not likely to get a grammar school, so you put the grammar school lower down for fear of losing a place at a non-grammar school, that can backfire on you, because if your child passes the 11 plus exam and became eligible for a place at a grammar school, if you say that the non-grammar was your higher preference, then you're likely to get your higher preference, the non-grammar. So it's best to list the schools strictly in order of preference. That's very important. Now, if you fill up your whole set of choices, 6 choices, with grammar schools or other schools where there are some selection criteria such as passing an exam or being in catchment, which your child may not fulfill. So that, for example, if you put 6 grammar schools and your child has to pass an 11 plus exam to get a place there, and then your child doesn't get the required scores, then all 6 schools will say no, and then you won't be offered any of the schools on your choice. That can happen, and it has happened. I strongly advise against putting all grammar schools on your CAF for that reason. Also, if you put schools which are not grammar schools, but they're schools which are outside of your catchment, and therefore your child is unlikely to qualify, then again the school is likely to say no. Especially if it's a good school, then it's likely to be oversubscribed. And if the school is oversubscribed, then people from outside of catchment are unlikely to be offered a place. So if you fill up your CAF with grammar schools and schools for which you are not in catchment, there is a danger that you might not be offered any of your choices.
So what happens if you get to the end of filling out this form, you've sent it off, and you don't actually get a place at any of these schools? What happens then? Well,
that's a really good question, and it's a very important point to consider. You have to have a fallback, because the answer to your question is that your local authority will offer a place at a school which has places left after all, if you like, requests have been satisfied. Now, the schools which are going to have places left after everybody who's applied and been offered their places, after that process is finished, they're going to be the schools which were not popular. And quite often when a school is not popular, it's for a good reason. And it may not be your nearest school. It may be quite a distance. So what could happen in that circumstance where you don't actually get an offer from any of the schools on your list is that you may get an offer from a school which is a non-grammar school, and it's unpopular, usually with good reason, and it's far away. So you could have the worst of all worlds if that situation arises. So I would say that avoid that situation at all costs. And because if you do have 6 choices, you have room to cater for the eventuality that your child won't get a grammar school. What I recommend is that right at the bottom of your common application form, your last choice should be a school that your child is very likely to be eligible for, i.e. that they will fulfill the published admissions criteria without having to pass an exam, i.e. Your catchment school or one of your catchment schools. Because if you don't put a catchment school and your child doesn't qualify for any of the other schools either, then you may have to travel far to an unpopular school. So if your child is not going to make it to grammar school, on balance it's probably better that they go to a non-grammar school which is local than a non-grammar school which involves travelling much further.
So that's quite a lot to be considered there, really, for any parent. So it's obviously very important that they start making the decisions really early on and don't leave it all to chance.
I think the best time to make those decisions is after having visited the schools, because it's not a decision that should be made based on what you've seen on a website or what you've seen in a prospectus or even on what somebody else has told you. I think that that's a decision that you really have to shoulder all the responsibility for personally as parents, what school you choose for your child. And I think that a visit, one or more visits actually, to the school is warranted and that your child should also go. But if I may sum up, the 2 main things to consider when filling in the common application form are: 1, that the school should be in order of preference, and 2, that there should be at least one fallback for which your child will almost certainly qualify without having to pass an exam.
Great.
And if you'd like to find out more about the courses available or just have some questions about the 11 Plus, then give Sir Tailor or one of his colleagues a call on the number provided through the Contact Us button.